So Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar is once again at the center of a big controversy. She's once again being called an anti-Semite for some remarks that she made against support for Israel. So once again, what we're seeing is that any sort of calling out Israel, you're considered anti-Semitic. And that's where we're at. Anytime anyone speaks about them and says, hey, and criticizes the lobby, they're called an anti-Semite. So just a little bit of history before we jump into this. A month ago or so, Representative Ilhan Omar was called out and called anti-Semitic for comments that she made in regards to AIPAC, which is a pro-Israel lobby. And that lobby gives a lot of money to lawmakers for them to be to legislate in the interest of Israel. And Representative Ilhan Omar called them out on that. Now, we do this all the time. We call out people who are bought out by big lobbies all the time. People call out reps who are bought out by the NRA. And when they refuse to make gun legislation, we say, oh, look, you're bought out by the NRA. When people are unwilling to make lower drug prices, like Cory Booker, when he voted against importing drugs from Canada, we said, hey, look, you're bought out by big pharma. Whenever anybody is bought out by big money, we call them out. But if you are given a bunch of money from AIPAC, which is the pro-Israel lobby, if you're called out on that, then people consider that whoever did the calling out anti-Semitic. So they're able to turn it around and immediately make it a racism sort of claim, which is really not the case. We call out lobbies all the time. So fast forward to now, Ilhan, and people were really upset about what happened. Her comments saying it's all about the Benjamins, when people were saying, why is there this support for Israel? And she said it's all about the Benjamins, meaning people are basically paid off by this lobby to support Israel. She was called an anti-Semite for that. Now, fast forward to today, and again, this comment that she made at wherever she was on Wednesday, this event on Wednesday, when she says people who push for allegiance to a foreign country, people once again said, oh my gosh, this is an anti-Semitic trope. Calling out the fact that there are numerous lawmakers who do push for the best interest of Israel. And you have to question, does the money have something to do with it? Now, maybe the money doesn't. Fair enough. Maybe these lawmakers would be supportive of Israel regardless of the money. But because there is so much money, you can't be sure. That's the problem. You can't be sure. So in response to her comments, this is where this whole thing gets thick. And it does get pretty intense because now the House is considering voting on a resolution to basically admonish Representative Omar. And we'll get to that. But in response to Ilhan Omar's comments, Representative from New York, Rita Lowy, she tweeted, quote, gross Islamophobic stereotypes like those about Ilhan Omar recently featured on posters in West Virginia are offensive and have no place in political discourse. So last week, there were some really offensive Islamophobic posters circulating about Ilhan Omar. And so she's referencing that, saying that those were bad. Okay. She then goes on to say anti-Semitic tropes that accuse Jews of dual loyalty are equally painful and must also be roundly condemned. She then says lawmakers must be able to debate without prejudice or bigotry. I am saddened that Rep. Omar continues to mischaracterize support for Israel. I urge her to retract this statement and engage in further dialogue with the Jewish community on why these comments are so hurtful. First of all, many of the lawmakers who take money from AIPAC and who support Israel are not Jewish. Nancy Pelosi is not Jewish. Most of the lawmakers that are taking the money, most of them are not Jewish. So this actually has nothing to do with what Representative Lowy is saying. I mean, she's saying that to accuse Jews of dual loyalty is equally painful and must also be roundly condemned. Ilhan Omar was not singling out Jews. She wasn't singling out Jewish lawmakers. She has been saying lawmakers in general who do the bidding of a foreign country. That's what the lobby, AIPAC, is getting lawmakers to do. They are giving gobs of money to lawmakers of a variety of faiths, many of them Christian, and getting them to cast votes on behalf of Israel. That's what the lobby's goal is. So it is not about Jews. It's about Israel. Now, Ilhan Omar responded, and she says, quote, our democracy is built on debate, Congresswoman. I should not be expected to have allegiance, pledge support to a foreign country in order to serve my country in Congress or serve on committee. The people of the Fifth elected me to serve their interests. I'm sure we can agree on that. So here's the thing, because Ilhan Omar will not say that she's in support of Israel and the tactics that Israel's taken against the Palestinians and the Arabs within their nation, because she won't support them, people are calling her out and saying that she's not American. They're calling her un-American for this, which doesn't make any sense. So because she's not supporting a foreign government. Now remember, Israel is a foreign government. They're a foreign government. So because she won't agree with all the decisions of this foreign government and she won't support this foreign government, she's now somehow un-American? That doesn't make sense, guys. She goes on to say, I have not mischaracterized our relationship with Israel. I have questioned it, and that has been clear from my end. And she's right on that. She has not mischaracterized our relationship with Israel. There's a lot of money that flows in the directions between the nations. And she's questioning that money. She's questioning that link. She says, quote, I am told every day that I am anti-American if I'm not pro-Israel. I find that to be problematic, and I am not alone. I just happen to be willing to speak up on it and open myself to attacks. My Americanness is questioned by the president and the GOP on a daily basis, yet my colleagues remain silent. I know what it means to be American, and no one will ever tell me otherwise. You know, she's right on this. I mean, many people accuse her of not being American because she's Muslim, and they see that she wears religious garb, and they look at her and they think that that's somehow un-American. And it is not un-American whatsoever to express your faith in whichever way you choose to express it, whether you choose to wear a cross or you choose to, however you choose to express your religion. That doesn't make you un-American. So she then says, being opposed to Netanyahu and the occupation is not the same as being anti-Semitic. I am grateful to the many Jewish allies who have spoken out and said the same. We must be willing to combat hate of all kinds while also calling out oppression of all kinds. I will do my best to live up to that. I hope my colleagues will join me in doing the same. So here we are once again, people saying that if you criticize Israel, you are anti-Semitic. And I get that Israel is majority Jewish, but it is not 100% Jewish. And even though they have passed some extremely controversial laws, they have really an apartheid going on there. Arabs have fewer rights, and they have Israel has passed laws. Like, for example, recently they actually passed a law saying that only Jewish people had a right to, what was it? It was like certain freedoms. And they just passed this law last year that only Jewish people had the right to, I'd have to look that up for you, and I'll put that down in the links below because for whatever reason, the tab I had open has closed, so I can't cite it. But a very controversial policy, and I'll put that link down below. But, they've definitely done some things that are making Arabs in their nation second-class citizens. So I understand that they are predominantly Jewish and that they... but Israel shouldn't be a Jewish nation necessarily, right? It should be like any other nation where, yes, you might have a majority of one group of people, but you also have other people, and they deserve the same rights, and they deserve to be treated like humans and citizens. And in Israel, they're not. And so she calls them out on this, and she calls out lawmakers who continue to support Israel, regardless of the apartheid state and the human rights abuses that are going on between Israel and the Palestinians. And I get it. This is a very, very complicated issue for Israel because to back it up, they do need support. Israel is a nation that is under attack on a regular basis. And we can't also ignore that fact that they are a speck in a sea, and that sea wants them gone. And so they're constantly battling for their existence, and they feel very much at threat, and they're very much on hyper alert. But that doesn't excuse their behaviors. It doesn't excuse their behavior. Just because I think that let's say, for example, to make an analogy, let's say somebody is trying to murder me. I know they're trying to kill me. They're on the hunt for me. I've got a restraining order out against them. The police have been notified. I know all of this. They're coming to get me, but that doesn't mean that I get to abuse and lock up and, let's say, chain or somehow suppress other people around me because I'm afraid of this one that's trying to get me. I can't then lose all sense of reason and become hyper alert and just start punishing everyone around me and suspecting everybody around me and really thinking that everybody's out to get me and then doing things to prevent them from getting me when they're not the ones getting me. They're not the ones trying to get me. So that's kind of what's going on in Israel. I know that was kind of a crude analogy, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say here. They're on hyper alert. So what they're doing are some really questionable things because they're on hyper alert, but they're on hyper alert for good reason. And I don't think we should forget that. But nonetheless, it does not excuse the human rights abuses and it doesn't excuse the apartheid that's going on in Israel. And Ilhan Omar is speaking up against this. And that is not anti-Semitic. I don't know what these people are going to do when, she comes out in support of Bernie Sanders, which she has been very much outspoken in support of Bernie Sanders in many other ways. When she comes out to endorse him, I don't know what these people are going to say when they keep thinking that she's some kind of an anti-Semite. He has privately called her to offer his support on her remarks that she made about AIPAC, and that was reported on. So now what is going on is the House is now trying to, they're actually passing, they're going to vote, it turns out, on some legislation that is meant to, I guess it's a resolution. Sometimes they vote on the silliest things like congratulating Super Bowl winners. It's like, what is Congress doing? I don't even know. But so they're going to vote on an anti-Semitism resolution now because of this controversy. So they're essentially going to give her a slap on the wrist and admonish her. They're not naming her in this resolution, but we all know who it's directed at. And this is according to Axios. It says the House will vote as soon as Wednesday on a resolution condemning anti-Semitism in response to another set of controversial comments on Israel made last week by freshman Rep. Ilhan Omar, the Washington Post reports. The text of the resolution does not mention Omar or specifically list any of her recent comments, according to a copy obtained by USA Today's Eliza Collins. It does, however, condemn the use of anti-Semitic stereotypes, including the myth of dual loyalty, which some Democrats have accused Omar of exploiting. Here's the quotes from the actual resolution. Whereas the myth of dual loyalty, including allegations that Jews should be suspected of being disloyal neighbors or citizens, has been used to marginalize and persecute the Jewish people for centuries for being a stateless minority. So Representative Ilhan Omar, again, was not directly alleging that Jewish Congress people are in support of Israel because they're disloyal to the country and they're truly in support of Israel. That's not what she said. She's been calling out all of the politicians, Christian, Jewish, doesn't matter their religion. She's been calling all of them out for taking money and supporting Israel, maybe because they were receiving a lot of money. Goes on to say, quote, whereas accusing Jews of dual loyalty because they support Israel, whether out of a religious connection, a commitment to Jewish self-determination after millennia of persecution, or an appreciation of shared values and interests, suggests that Jews cannot be patriotic Americans and trusted neighbors when Jews have served our nation since its founding, whether in public life or military service. Now, once again, she didn't call out Jews. She wasn't saying anything about Jews. She's talking about politicians who constantly vote in favor of Israel, will not speak up against Israel when Israel commits human rights abuses. They're just blind loyalty. Kind of blind, right? It's not really all that blind. They're taking a bunch of money. So it's loyalty based on the money. Now, this reminded me, this is actually what the law was. It was about self-determination. So the law was passed last year that only Jews in the nation of Israel had the right to self-determination. Arabs didn't get that right. Only Jews got the right to self-determination, which is an extremely controversial law. So this is what's going on with her. Just can't stress it enough. Listen, we can have allies, and I understand that Israel is an ally, but we've got to be able to criticize even our allies when they do things that are really abhorrent. We have to be able to stand up and say, look, you've been my friend, and we're pals. I get it, we're pals, but you're in the wrong here. And we're not gonna let you get away with this. We're not gonna just stand by and not say anything. But you know what? That's what the U.S. has been doing. We've been standing by and not saying anything while we watched our buddy basically pummel somebody else. And we just stood there and said, whatever. No big deal, I guess. We're friends, so I'm just going to turn a blind eye to this. And many lawmakers are saying, no, we don't really want to turn a blind eye to this. This is wrong. So That's not anti-Semitic. And once again, here we are having to defend her, and here we are going to be called names, like as if, it's the shaming. It's calling somebody a racist in order to silence them. Well, it's not working with her, is it? Because she keeps talking.